I'm not eating next to him. Move him somewhere else. The loud voice cut through the elegant dining hall of the luxury cruise ship like a knife. More than 300 passengers suddenly fell silent. A wealthy woman pointed directly at an elderly black man standing beside her table. I'm not eating next to him. The waiter froze. Ma'am, this is his assigned seat. Her husband slammed his wine glass onto the table. Then your captain made a mistake. Nearby passengers stopped eating. Forks paused in midair. Phones quietly appeared beneath tables. The elderly man stood calmly, holding his dinner invitation in one hand. His name was Samuel Carter. 72 years old, the woman looked Samuel up and down. This is the captain's dinner. Her voice grew louder. Premium guests only. A nervous waiter checked the tablet again. No, ma'am. Mr. Samuel Carter is assigned to this table. The husband laughed. Really? He looked at Samuel. And what exactly does he do? Nobody spoke. The room became painfully quiet. Samuel answered softly. I served my country. The husband smirked. Well, this isn't a military ship. A few passengers looked uncomfortable. Others pretended not to hear. Then the woman said something that made the entire table go silent. If he stays, she crossed her arms. We leave. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Samuel looked at the frightened young waiter. Then he smiled gently. It's all right, son. He folded the invitation card and slipped it into his pocket. I've spent enough years standing where people didn't want me. The words hit harder than anyone expected. A little girl sitting nearby looked up at her father. Dad, why are they being mean to the old man? Her father lowered his eyes. He had no answer. Samuel quietly turned and walked away. No anger, no argument, no complaint, just dignity. But something strange happened. As Samuel passed the service entrance, a young crew member carrying silver trays suddenly stopped. He stared at Samuel's face, then at the small silver eagle pin on his jacket. His eyes widened. Recognition, the crew member immediately rushed through a restricted staff door. 30 seconds later, on the ship's bridge, Captain Richard Hayes, a respected 60-year-old former Navy officer, listened as the young crew member whispered into his ear. The captain's expression changed instantly. What did you say? The crew member nodded. I'm certain, Captain. Captain Hayes looked through the bridge windows toward the dark ocean. Then he looked down at an old photograph hanging beside his desk. His face turned pale. Without another word, he picked up the ship-wide communication microphone. Back in the dining hall, the wealthy couple smiled proudly, believing they had won. Passengers slowly returned to their meals. Then suddenly, the soft music stopped. Every speaker on the massive cruise ship came alive, and the captain's voice echoed across every deck. Attention, ladies and gentlemen. A strange seriousness filled his voice. I need everyone's attention immediately. The entire dining hall fell silent. No one knew it yet, but within the next few minutes, this voyage would become a journey no passenger would ever forget. The captain's voice echoed through every hallway, restaurant, and balcony of the Ocean Majesty. Attention, ladies and gentlemen. I respectfully ask every passenger to remain where you are. Dinner service is temporarily suspended. A wave of confused murmurs swept across the ship. Dinner suspended? What happened? Is something wrong with the engines? The wealthy husband rolled his eyes. Probably another pointless safety drill. His wife picked up her wine glass again. I hope they hurry. I'm starving. Across the dining room, Samuel Carter quietly reached for the exit, hoping to disappear before anyone noticed him again. But before he could open the door, the restaurant manager rushed toward him. Mr. Carter, please, Samuel stopped. I'm afraid I can't let you leave. Samuel looked surprised. You don't have to do this. The manager lowered his voice. I wasn't given a choice. Before Samuel could answer, the massive dining hall doors slowly opened. Not one waiter. Not two security guards. The captain himself walked in. Captain Richard Hayes. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a crisp white naval uniform covered with gold stripes. The entire dining room instinctively stood. Except one table. The wealthy couple remained seated. The husband whispered with a smug smile, "So now the captain's coming to apologize." His wife nodded. Finally, Captain Hayes ignored them completely. Instead, he walked straight across the dining room, past every luxury table, past the celebrities, past the wealthy investors, past the social media influencers recording everything. He stopped directly in front of Samuel Carter. For a brief second, neither man spoke. Then something happened that no one expected. Captain Hayes slowly removed his captain's hat. He placed it against his chest and stood at full military attention. The entire dining room froze. A fork slipped from someone's hand and clattered against the floor. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the captain spoke. His voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "Good evening," he paused. "Chief Carter." Samuel's eyes widened. "It's been a long time, Captain," gasps spread across the room. "Chief? Captain knows him? What is happening?" The wealthy woman's confident smile disappeared. Captain Hayes looked around the room. "I believe every person here deserves to know why tonight's dinner has changed." He turned toward Samuel. "But first," he smiled respectfully, "I owe this man an apology." Samuel shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything. I do." The captain's voice became heavier. "Because I allowed someone who once risked his life for others," he glanced toward the wealthy couple, "to be humiliated on my ship." The room became painfully silent. Several passengers slowly lowered their eyes. One elderly woman quietly wiped away a tear. The wealthy husband finally stood. "Captain, this is getting ridiculous. We simply asked for another table." Captain Hayes looked directly at him. "No." His voice was calm. "You asked this man to disappear." The husband folded his arms. "I had every right to choose who I sit beside." Captain Hayes didn't argue. Instead, he smiled. "A few moments ago, you asked what this man does." He looked around the room. "I think it's time everyone learns who Samuel Carter really is." Every phone in the dining room was now recording. Passengers leaned forward. Even the musicians had stopped playing. The wealthy couple exchanged nervous glances for the first time that evening. Captain Hayes slowly reached into the inside pocket of his uniform. He removed an old, slightly faded photograph. Its edges were worn with age. He held it high enough for everyone nearby to see. 28 years ago, his voice almost broke. "This picture was taken only 30 minutes before my ship exploded." The room fell completely silent. Then, he looked directly at Samuel. "And the man standing beside me in this photograph," he paused, "is the only reason I'm alive today." The wealthy couple stared in disbelief. But Captain Hayes wasn't finished. Not even close. Captain Hayes carefully looked at the old photograph before passing it to the nearest waiter. "Please, let everyone see it." The waiter slowly carried the faded picture from table to table. Passengers leaned closer. In the photo, a much younger Captain Hayes stood beside a powerful African-American sailor in a Navy uniform. Both men were smiling. Behind them was a massive warship. Across the bottom of the picture, faded black ink read, "Brothers at sea, never leave a sailor behind." The wealthy husband frowned. "So what? They served together. That doesn't explain all this." Captain Hayes turned toward him. "No, it doesn't." He slowly walked to the center of the dining hall. "But this does." Every eye followed him. 28 years ago, our ship was carrying more than 200 sailors through the North Atlantic during a rescue mission. The weather turned violent, waves over 40 feet high. The engine room caught fire, and within minutes, the ship began sinking. The dining hall was silent. Even the sound of the ocean seemed to disappear. Captain Hayes continued. "The explosion trapped me below deck. My leg was crushed under a steel beam. I couldn't move. I ordered every sailor to abandon the compartment. I believed I was already dead." Samuel quietly looked down at the floor. He had heard this story before, many times, but it never became easier. Captain Hayes smiled sadly. There was only one man who ignored my order. He slowly turned toward Samuel. Chief Samuel Carter. The room remained frozen. He went back. Not once. Not twice. 3 separate times. Passengers looked at Samuel with growing disbelief. Captain Hayes continued. The first time, he carried 2 injured sailors to safety. The second time, he rescued our communications officer. The third time, the captain paused. His voice cracked. He came back for me. Several passengers quietly wiped tears from their eyes. The wealthy woman looked uncomfortable. Captain Hayes took a deep breath. The flames had already reached the hallway. The ceiling was collapsing. I remember telling him, "Chief, leave me." Captain Hayes smiled through watery eyes. You know what he said? Nobody answered. Captain Hayes looked directly at Samuel. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Nobody gets left behind today." A heavy silence settled over the room. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, as if he could still hear the fire, still smell the smoke, still feel the freezing ocean wind. Captain Hayes continued quietly. He carried me nearly 200 yards through smoke, fire, and collapsing steel. Minutes after we escaped, the compartment exploded. A stunned gasp swept across the dining hall. One passenger whispered, "My God," another slowly lowered his phone. No one was thinking about dinner anymore. Captain Hayes looked toward Samuel. I received medals, promotions, command, recognition. But the man who saved my life, he paused, retired quietly. Never asked for applause. Never asked for attention. Never told his story. The wealthy husband suddenly forced a laugh. Fine, he was a hero. I respect that. But what happened tonight has nothing to do with his military career. Several passengers immediately turned toward him. The room felt colder. Captain Hayes didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward one of the large panoramic windows overlooking the dark Atlantic Ocean. For several long seconds, he simply stared outside. Then he spoke without turning around. You still don't understand. The wealthy couple exchanged confused glances. Captain Hayes slowly looked back. No, this isn't about what Chief Carter did 28 years ago. His expression became more serious than anyone had seen before. It's about something he did. He paused, less than 3 hours ago. The entire dining hall went completely silent. Samuel's head lifted. Even he looked surprised. Passengers stared at the captain in confusion. The wealthy woman whispered, "What is he talking about?" Captain Hayes looked around the room. I wasn't planning to tell anyone this tonight, but after what I witnessed, I believe everyone deserves to know the truth. He slowly reached into his uniform again. This time, he pulled out a sealed security incident report, stamped with today's date. The wealthy couple's confident expressions disappeared, because suddenly, whatever they thought they knew about Samuel Carter was only the beginning. Captain Hayes slowly held up the sealed security report. No one in the dining hall dared to speak. You all think tonight began with what happened in this room. He gently shook his head. It didn't. It began this afternoon, on Deck 9. The wealthy couple exchanged uneasy glances. Samuel frowned slightly. Even he didn't know what the captain was about to reveal. Captain Hayes opened the report. At 2:17 this afternoon, our security cameras recorded an incident. He looked toward the ship's head of security. Mr. Collins, please. The security chief immediately walked forward carrying a tablet. He connected it to the large display screen normally used for evening entertainment. The giant screen came to life. Passengers instinctively turned toward it. Captain Hayes spoke quietly. I want everyone to watch, carefully. The video began. The timestamp read, 2:17 p.m. The footage showed the upper observation deck under bright afternoon sunshine. Children were running around. Families were taking photos. Crew members were serving drinks. Everything looked peaceful. Then, the camera suddenly shook. Several passengers on the screen began screaming. A little boy no older than 6 was climbing onto the outer glass safety railing while chasing a bright red toy airplane that had been carried by the wind. His terrified mother was only a few feet away. "Daniel," she screamed. The little boy reached too far. His tiny foot slipped. Gasps filled the real dining hall as the video showed the child falling over the railing. Only one hand caught the edge. The entire dining hall watched in horror. People in the video froze. Some screamed. Others simply stared. No one moved. Until one man did. Samuel Carter. The elderly veteran dropped his walking cane. Without thinking, he sprinted. Several passengers in the dining hall looked at Samuel in disbelief. "He can run?" someone whispered. On the screen, Samuel ignored his own safety. He threw himself onto the deck. One hand grabbed the railing. The other caught the little boy's wrist. The child's body dangled over the open Atlantic Ocean. Powerful winds slammed against both of them. Samuel's face twisted with pain. His shoulder trembled violently. The little boy cried, "Please don't let go." Samuel looked him in the eyes. "I won't. Not once. Not for a second." Behind them, passengers finally rushed forward. Crew members joined in. Together, they pulled both of them back onto the deck. The video ended. The dining hall was silent. Completely silent. A woman quietly covered her mouth. An elderly man removed his glasses to wipe away tears. Captain Hayes spoke softly. The child survived. A young woman suddenly stood from a nearby table. Tears streamed down her face. Holding the little boy's hand, she slowly walked toward Samuel. Every passenger stepped aside. She stopped directly in front of him. Her voice shook. "My name is Emily." She looked at Samuel with tear-filled eyes. "You saved my son today." Little Daniel wrapped both arms around Samuel's waist. "Thank you, Grandpa." Samuel smiled gently and hugged the child. "You've got a whole life ahead of you, young man. Promise me you'll make it count." The little boy nodded. "I promise." There wasn't a dry eye left in the dining room. Then Captain Hayes slowly turned toward the wealthy couple. His expression wasn't angry. It was disappointed. "This afternoon," he said quietly, "while Chief Carter was risking his life, you two were standing less than 20 feet away." The couple looked confused. Captain Hayes nodded toward the screen. "You were there." The security chief replayed another camera angle. This time, everyone saw the wealthy couple. The husband had pulled out his phone. Instead of helping, he was recording. The wife stood frozen beside him. Neither one took a single step toward the child. Whispers swept through the dining hall. "They just watched, they didn't help. Oh my God," the wealthy husband quickly stood. "That's not fair. We would have been in the way." Captain Hayes calmly interrupted him. "No one is criticizing you for not climbing over the railing." He took one slow step closer. "I'm criticizing you for looking at the man who risked everything to save a child and deciding he wasn't worthy of sitting beside you." The husband opened his mouth, but no words came out. The captain looked around the room. "I've commanded ships for 35 years. I've met billionaires, world leaders, Hollywood stars, professional athletes," he paused. But tonight, he placed a respectful hand on Samuel's shoulder. "The greatest man aboard this ship was the one many of you never even noticed." Just then, the ship's public address system beeped again. A crew member hurried into the dining hall, whispering urgently into the captain's ear. Captain Hayes looked stunned. He slowly smiled. Then he turned back toward the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just received a message from our next port." He paused. "And after what they heard happened on this ship tonight, they've made a decision. One that no one aboard the Ocean Majesty saw coming." The dining hall remained completely silent. Every eye stayed fixed on Captain Hayes. He slowly folded the message that had just been handed to him. Then he smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just spoken with the Harbor Authority. Our next destination has requested permission to welcome one passenger with full military honors." Confused whispers spread across the room. Captain Hayes looked toward Samuel. "They're not welcoming me. They're not welcoming this ship. They're welcoming," he paused, "Chief Samuel Carter." The room erupted into stunned gasps. Samuel immediately shook his head. "No, Captain. That's not necessary." Captain Hayes smiled warmly. "Chief, you've spent your entire life saying those words. That's not necessary. You never asked for medals. You never asked for applause. You never asked anyone to know your name." He looked around the dining hall. "But tonight, I believe respect has finally caught up with you." At that exact moment, the ship's horn echoed across the ocean. A deep, powerful sound rolled through the night. Passengers instinctively looked toward the panoramic windows. Far in the distance, lights from the harbor began appearing. Then, one by one, small escort boats surrounded the ocean majesty. Blue and white lights reflected across the calm water. Several passengers hurried toward the windows. "What is happening?" Captain Hayes answered quietly. "The Coast Guard." As the cruise ship approached the harbor, two Coast Guard vessels slowly moved into formation on either side. Their crews stood perfectly still. Every officer raised a formal salute. The entire dining hall watched in stunned silence. Some passengers began crying. Others simply stood frozen. Samuel looked out the window. His eyes filled with tears. For the first time that evening, the proud veteran couldn't hide his emotions. Captain Hayes stepped beside him. "They never forgot, Chief. They were just waiting for the chance to say thank you." Outside, the escort boats sounded their horns together. The deep echoes rolled across the harbor. Inside the dining hall, no one touched their food. No one spoke. Then something unexpected happened. The wealthy woman slowly stood from her chair. Her expensive jewelry no longer seemed important. Her confident smile was gone. She walked toward Samuel. Every passenger watched. When she reached him, she lowered her eyes. She struggled to speak. "I judged you before I knew anything about you." Samuel remained silent. Tears filled her eyes. "I've spent my whole life teaching my grandchildren about kindness, and tonight, I failed my own lesson." The wealthy husband walked over beside her. For the first time all evening, his voice was quiet. "I can't erase what I said. But I'm truly sorry." The room remained silent. Everyone waited for Samuel's response. He looked at both of them. Then, he smiled. Not proudly, not triumphantly, just kindly. "My mother used to tell me something." He looked toward the ocean. "People can change the moment they choose humility." He turned back toward the couple. "I accept your apology." A wave of relief spread through the dining hall. Captain Hayes smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have one final request." He looked around the room. "Tonight, I'd like every passenger aboard this ship to join me." Without another word, the captain stood at attention. One crew member followed, then another, then another. Within seconds, every member of the ship's crew stood and saluted Samuel Carter. Passengers slowly rose from their chairs. An elderly woman placed her hand over her heart. A little boy copied the salute. A young couple quietly wiped away tears. Then, the entire dining hall erupted into a standing ovation. Not for a celebrity, not for a billionaire, not for a famous politician, but for a quiet man who had spent his entire life serving others without asking for recognition. The applause continued. 1 minute, then 2, then 3. Samuel lowered his head, overwhelmed. Captain Hayes leaned toward him and whispered, "They're not clapping because you saved my life." He smiled. "They're clapping because tonight you reminded all of us what real greatness looks like." Samuel looked around the room, then softly replied, "The greatest victories aren't won in battle. They're won when hate loses to respect." The camera slowly pulled back. Beyond the windows, the harbor lights shimmered across the peaceful ocean. Inside, people from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different lives, were united by one simple truth. Money could buy the finest suite on the ship. It could buy expensive dinners, luxury vacations, and first-class service. But it could never buy honor, respect, or the kind of character that inspires an entire ship to stand. If this story reminded you that true greatness is measured by character, not by wealth or appearance, comment on or below. And if you believe one act of kindness can change someone's life forever, subscribe to Tale Fame for more unforgettable stories that remind us why humanity always matters most.